All right, welcome everybody to our LinkedIn Live. I am thrilled to have my good friend here, Jim Wagner, with the Contract Network. I'm Zach Posner, a co-founder and managing partner of the LegalTech Fund. But kind of enough about me. I think folks are here to learn about you, Jim, and we love learning more. And I'm seeing guitars in the background, so maybe we'll.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. I have guitars in the background. I can afford to buy them. I can't buy talent though.
So, the first question we always ask is before we jump into what you're doing at TCN, a little bit about you. What are some things that people may not know about you, ignoring the guitars?
Yeah, ignoring the guitars. Some things that people may not know. Actually, we'll start with the guitars. Is I played in a lot of bands in college and law school, and even after law school, they were sort of pop punk type bands. So that's one thing people may not know. Um, another thing that people may not know is that I actually. Another thing that people may not know is that I grew up. Loving sports, loving the outdoors, loving all kinds of things. um, I grew up in the Ozark Mountains. There's something that a lot of people wouldn't appreciate. I genuinely grew up in a double wide in the Ozark Mountains for about 6 years. That's something that people probably don't know about me. And other than that, I've been married and have three kids, and just have a lot of fun following them around and enjoying the things that they like to do.
Awesome. I'm literally taking notes. The next thing I usually ask people is, if you weren't in legal tech, what would you be doing? But I look at you and say, like, you are legal tech. You know,
That,
and I want you to
that
go into some of your background because you're like one of the most successful entrepreneurs we've ever come across. Your
uh,
stories of watching this space transform and be on top of every single trend for the past 20 plus years. I'll let you do, but if you weren't
yeah.
doing legal tech, what would you be doing? Or playing guitar?
Gosh, I loved working as a photographer in college. I love the creative aspect of it. The photography covers up for the fact that I'm not really very talented, but I can like kind of frame something. So I love those sorts of things. I love photography. I love writing, all sorts of things from a creative perspective. I really like. But I think if I were doing anything outside of legal tech, I probably would. I love teaching, and it's not that I have that much to offer, but I love being part of that environment and the discussions. I get a big treat. I get to go up and teach at my alma mater for law school. I get to go up and do that a few times a year, participate in classes. It's a real treat. I just love being around bright people who want to engage.
All right. Can you go into a little bit about your background? And the goal is to get to TCN quickly, but just like you've
Nah.
like done so many neat things from I think from photo, like talk about like an arc of understanding
Yeah.
technology and where it comes from. If you don't mind just going into that.
No, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it. I graduated from law school in 1993. And when I came out, just as a frame of reference, most law firms had computers, but they were PCs. Most of the communication that took place with clients, you would not email with them. You would fax, you would FedEx, etc. If we had a big distribution list, there was no windows. There were no, we didn't send out 30 packages to 30 different participants in a transaction via email. We all did FedEx, etc. um, uh, I was never a true technologist from the perspective of being someone who like behind the scenes was coding. But I started getting involved, Zach, in the firm's what's now Brian Cave. I started getting involved in the firm's technology decisions because as an early professional, I did sort of two things that sort of stood out and started me down a path of like, hey, the legal profession could really use a strong injection of technology and process. And one of those was we were working on a very large refinancing project for what was then called well, it was part of the FDIC. Long story short, part of as a bunch of thrifts went under in the early 90s, and we were refinancing all these properties, and we didn't get the numbers for the final financings like until the night before the closing, and we would literally do like 50 refinancings at once. And so I got very involved with our office pool, and the technology that we had, which was still using WordPerfect back then, Zach, and started teeing up these closings where the professionals, that we the attorneys would gather all of the data, and we would maintain our forms over here. And this all sounds so simple today. It's like, oh, of course, we would gather all the data and we had our forms. And then when we got the final numbers for the closings, we would merge everything together and create these loan packets. Well, it's super obvious today, but back then, actually, it was like, oh, you've really changed our ability to get these things done by creating these things, right? And then I also got very involved with M&A due diligence, Zach, and due diligence, and also like closing checklists and things like that. That candidly, even back then, like people were really scratching a lot of stuff out on paper and those sorts of things. And so I started using Lotus 123, a precursor to Excel, and started using those things to manage all of our closing checklists and due diligence and all these things. And people were like, "You are a technologist." I'm like, "No, I am someone who sees that technology can solve a problem." And that's a long wind up, but here's the pitch, is that once I saw just how many opportunities there were to bring basic technology to solve legal and legal adjacent problems, like that's been it. That's been my career arc ever since. And so I've been, building technology and technology-enabled companies back for the legal community now since 2000, when I left the practice of law and started building those businesses.
But give us a quick rundown of that arc, because it's pretty awesome.
Okay, so I joined a little photocopy company. That was one of my clients as their chief operating officer, and I was brought in to infuse that company and turn it into a technology company. That was a company called DTI, which is now Epic. And I served as chief operating officer there and started all of our technology business. When I started, we had, I think, 200 employees, and we had 5 computers in the entire company. And by the time I had left, our arc in that business was completely, a technology arc. Then I got together with my long-term business partner, Steve Harbour, who many of the folks in the audience know. And Steve and I built a business called Discover Ready. And we were first to market to go out to corporates and also to law firms and say, hey, it really doesn't make sense today to have associates who are billing at $500 an hour plus going through and trying to plow through what literally became millions of emails. And so we went out on a fixed fee basis and said, we'll do this on a turnkey basis for you. We'll review your email. And we became the first outsourced fixed fee, what's now called managed document review. We were out there doing it. And then, a tip of the hat to Bob Rowe, who was doing it as part of Nexon Pruitt in South Carolina. And then Huron bought Bob's business. We became competitors, but also with a lot of respect for each other. So Bob and we started carving out that space together, and now that's the default business model. Then in 2014, I believe, end of 2013, 2014, Steve and I decided to take a lot of the same approaches that we had taken for managed document review and take that over into the contracting world. We met a lot of great people, Ned Gannon at Ebrevia, Noah Weisberg at Kira. We ended up partnering with the folks at Seal Software because they really had a focus on enterprise, which was sort of Steve's and my sweet spot. So we built a company called Apogee. We started becoming the default model building team for Seal. So Seal had a default set of models. But then when they would go out to a big bank, sort of fill in the names because we did business with everyone. We became the default team that was building the models for Seal for all these different applications, and became so inextricably linked to their business. In 2018, we merged our company into Seal. In 2019, we kind of did a little bit of a management transition. I became president of Seal, and then we sold that company to DocuSign in May of 2020. And then my title was head of agreement cloud strategy for DocuSign, where I worked on all things AI and contract related for them for about 18 months before founding the Contract Network. That was too long, but at least you got the story.
No, that was awesome, and arguably arguably the biggest legal tech company ever, DocuSign.
Yeah, it's the quiet secret out there that DocuSign really is really, behind the scenes. It's like, what are they doing? It's legal documents every time. And I think Scott Ulrich and Dan Springer, who were running DocuSign at the time, definitely got that. And now it's really exciting to see what DocuSign is doing today. I think they're really recommitted to that space. It's pretty cool.
And I want to get to TCN in 1 second, but just one question: the rate of technology change, like, how do you feel it is today? Because obviously you've been thinking about this for north of 20 years right now. And then the construct that, like, you were an associate that was probably familiar with what technology was capable of, and you said,
right,
I want to apply that to legal. Do you feel that, like, today you're seeing that that attitude or that eagerness to try, like, spreading beyond the associates, or do you feel like it's going to be the associates that are going to pull a lot of these firms into this stuff because they're native, or your kids are growing up with this stuff natively? Yeah. So when they get to a law firm, so just curious about those two things.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's talk about the rate of adoption. Off the charts relative to anything that we've ever seen. It's just this is a shining moment for the legal industry. And I know I've given you props, and I don't want the audience to say, oh, well, he's saying nice things because Zach invited him to be on the show. But Zach, if I go back even to DTI, right? Like, we were growing a really nice company year over year, 100% growth, really great EBITDA, a very, very nice company. We went out, and Zach, we met with a who's who of venture and then private equity firms in Boston and Chicago and New York and everything. We had a hard time getting a deal done. Like, as a matter of fact, we went to market in essence 3 times, even when I was there, and finally got our deal done. And candidly, it did correspond to the kick in of the technology, but, like, people didn't want to touch it, right? And then even, even as recently as 2014, 2015, if Steve and I wanted to go raise money around what we were trying to build, like, who was going to invest? It didn't exist. And now we look at it, with what you're doing, with what strategics are doing, whether it's TR or whether it's Touchdown or, all these folks, like, there's an ecosystem. We couldn't get people to write about us. We couldn't get people to tell the story. Now you've got great folks
we're begging you. We're excited.
Yeah, it's just it's such a great moment. I mean, how many folks follow Bob Ambrogi? A lot of folks. How many folks follow Richard Tromans? And obviously, law.com. It's a great moment. In terms of law firms investing, I think that's also happening. Are there learning lessons that the law firms are going to have to go through? Yes. And will their actual acts and the technology adoption happen for them relative to what they kind of feel like they need to have a little bit of a story to tell the market? Every law firm needs to have a story that they tell their clients, existing and prospective clients, about what they're doing. But when you peel back the onion in terms of the actual deliverables, I think your question is a good one, which is are they really doing it? Who's doing it? Is it the associates who are coming along? Is it the partners? And what I would say is I think it's going to vary a lot by firm and by practice. Law firms are filled with fiefdoms. It just is what it is. And so if I'm a substantial rainmaker in a particular area, am I going to interrupt myself if my clients are not insisting on it? it's really difficult. It's really difficult. The other thing is how easy is our technology, right? And so, for example, like I really like what Dan Houck and Josh are doing at Net Documents, where they're bringing solutions directly into how the lawyers are doing their work every day in a way that maybe doesn't cause a lot of change management, enablement, etc. I think that's the key for widespread adoption at law firms.
That user experience is very important here, like even more so than the verticals that may have where the pure technology may win the best. Where here, like you got to have that user experience and kind of meet people with where they're at and
meet people where they are. For sure.
Right, let's jump over to TCN because we started our fund 4 years ago, and your vision is exactly the vision that we have for what the future of how contracting can change and how technology can be used. And I think that you're doing two things that are pretty awesome. One is just on the workflow side, and then two, the way that you're thinking about layering some of the newer AI stuff into it, and you put them together, and I think you got a killer construct. Well, maybe give a little bit of a story on the vision and sure. and where you sit today and what you're excited about.
Yeah, sure. So the vision is most contracts sort of come down to a relatively small number of issues. How do we help two parties or more find common ground? How do we help them match on the things that they match on, even if they're not necessarily used to using the same form? But how do we get them to a point where they can align quickly on the things where there's no difference, and then get down to those 5 things? That's the idea. Our goal is to, the other piece of it is that right now, as we kick off, we're actually quite focused on a couple of verticals where we look for a pattern, Zach. And that pattern is we're looking for networks of the same players negotiating actually with the same parties and working off of similar documents. And people might say, does that really happen? Like, why on earth? Like, it seems like that should be efficient. But the irony is it's not. So, for example, one pattern that we're working on, Zach, is in middle market mergers and acquisitions. And so a typical bank, a bank, when they want to sell a company, Zach, they'll issue a teaser to like 300 folks that say, do you want to bid on this company? Do you want to learn more about it? Do you want the confidential offering memorandum? And so they'll send out this teaser, and every single person that opts in, every single prospective buyer has to sign an NDA. And you would think, well, they do this enough where the process must be efficient. But actually, it's starting over every single time from scratch. And that to me is like, okay, when I was a third-year associate, I was smart to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Let's bring some pragmatic approaches to this, and let's bring this to a halt. Let's find a way to solve for it. And really, Zach, that's one of our first networks: private equity firms and investment banks, helping them negotiate their M&A NDAs faster. And by the way, again, for folks who are like, NDAs don't get negotiated, I just wanted you to know, in the private markets M&A world, 90% of the NDAs get negotiated before they're signed. 90%. And we're out there, the last 3 transactions we've worked on, we've been able to eliminate the negotiation on between 50 and 70% of the NDAs. We're now at a point where they're not getting negotiated. We're bringing the folks together. And even when they are negotiated, to your point, like we've got some pretty cool workflow, we got some pretty cool AI that helps folks see, oh, this does or does not align with my standards. How do I collaborate? Those sorts of things.
And the thing that I love about LegalTech, and I'm assuming that this is just like a game changer. It's like somebody used it, and like once they use it, they say, we're not going back. Like we're not going to spend twice the amount of time for a document. That doesn't mean that, but I'm curious like what the feedback's been.
Right. That's the idea. And I think that's the North Star. One of our investors, Zach, who they have a background, for example, at Stripe and legal and whatnot. One of the things that they said was, your North Star for a product should be exactly what you just said, Zach, is folks say, I'm never going back. Yeah. I've done this, I'm never going back. And I won't I won't say, oh yeah, we've nailed it, and by the way, that's exactly the way this is going to work. But we've already seen exactly that moment where we got a note from a middle market investment bank. I think they've done 2 projects on our platform over the last 2 weeks, and like by the time they kicked off the second one, they were like, we're not going back. We this is the best experience we've had, and this just makes too much sense.
No, and I can only imagine being that third-year associate or being that junior person at the law firm that, or at the private equity fund that's like, I'm sorry, the bank that's sitting there and having to deal with this
Yeah.
and saying this is not a good use. Like we've literally had for some of these products, associates say they will not work at a place that does not have this type of technology.
Right. And I hope we can do that. I hope we can be that sort of company someday.
Yep.
Our secret sauce, Zach, right now, because we're not trying to be ubiquitous. We're not trying to solve for the entire contract life cycle process. We're not competing in CLM deals. Our secret sauce is that we're really focused on winning and solving a problem for a core use case. Now, the second, and so, M&A NDAs is one of those. We also do work in the clinical trials community. It follows the same pattern. But I'll also clarify the second thing around that, Zach, and that is that we, by virtue of focusing on a particular use case, one of the things that we've done that I think is most interesting is we've used generative AI. My background is in AI. We sold Seal to DocuSign. I've been using AI even since we first started reviewing emails. But one of the things I'm most excited about, you mentioned the AI, is we're actually using it to surface insights from large collections of transactions. And so we're actually using the generative AI to create market data. And so now when we sit down with an investment bank, the first step of our process is to say, we can tell you exactly how this NDA is going to get negotiated. Do you want to send it out, or do you want to get the NDA fixed? And so, our clients are listening to us. They're all nodding their head when we show them this is how you fix your NDA. And so a big piece of what we do is actually fix it up front. And I think that piece of verticalization, focus on a core use case, and then solve a problem not for one party, but for the industry. And that's the last piece of our vision. I know I've kind of gone on about this, but our vision is that we're not trying to solve this for fill in the name of one investment bank or fill in the name of one private equity firm. We're really trying to bring the negotiation of M&A NDAs to a close for the entire industry. And that's our vision.
Yeah. So look, I think when, or at least when I've seen your demo in the past, it's just, so one of these things you just see it and you just like get it. And you almost say like, duh, like where is this? Well, why doesn't this exist? Where has this been? Yeah. If there are folks listening out here either today, or if they watch the video and they want to learn more, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah. So obviously you can go to the contractnetwork.com, and there's a, sign up for access. There's also some of our market studies. That's probably the easiest way. And obviously I'm an easy guy to reach, jim.wagner@thecontractnetwork.com. So we won't be hiding from you. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, we busted our 20-minute goal, but I can't thank you enough for doing this. You said you wanted to teach, and you taught me a little bit today, and I'm sure everybody else on this call. So thank you for taking a few minutes with this, Jim.
Zach, thank you for everything that you and your team have done to shine a light on, a great community. And thank you for leading in the way that you are.
Awesome. And tell me the next time you're playing with your band.
Right.
Cheers. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.